Should now be recording. Yes. Hey Sindhu.
Hey Molly.
Hey. Thanks for being on my pod.
I'm so excited that you asked.
Yeah, of course. So before we kind of like resume what we were talking about before, maybe it's helpful if I give a little bit of like background about who you are and what you do. So Sindhu, as you go by Sindhu Vee, obviously now you're a very successful comedian. You started doing comedy in when, 2012?
Yeah, my first gig was 2012, but I started doing it seriously in end of 2014, beginning of 2015.
Okay.
Where I started like gigging every week.
Right.
Prior to that, I was gigging very randomly.
And by gigging, you mean like stand-up?
Yeah, by going to gigs.
Right, okay, doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
And before that, you were a banker?
Before that, I was a stay-at-home mom.
Before that, you were a stay-at-home mom. So then when did you... Obviously, we're going to go back to what we were talking about before, but just quickly, when did you stop doing banking? Was it after, when you first had children?
Yeah, I stopped a year and a half after my first kid, I stopped.
Okay.
And then I was home for 12 and a half years.
Wow.
Just having kids and taking them to school. And learning what play dates are.
Yeah.
And nut allergies.
Yeah.
And birthday parties where people with whose kids had nut allergies would drop them off and then give me this box and say her EpiPen is in here. And I was like, dude, I'm not a nurse. Yeah. You either stay with your kid or take it home.
I know.
Turns out that's a very unpopular. What if your kid drops dead at my party?
Honestly,
First of all, that's horrible. Second of all, this is my child's birthday.
It's gonna ruin it.
Make it about him or her, please. So learned all that stuff.
And they have those, like, I remember at school, those girls, and I'm not mocking these people, but they always had those, like, metal bracelets. And I think those metal bracelets were supposed to be a warning that you knew, like, by the way, this person could die soon.
No, and nothing bad about a nut allergy.
Of course.
But I think there's a certain presumption on the part of the parents that I was qualified to give an EpiPen injection.
Yeah.
To which, I was like, you don't understand, man. This is not my area of expertise.
Yeah.
Plus, I do have 23 other kids. I've always found that fascinating, that they had that level of confidence in me.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But I find that interesting anyway, like, even though this is a side note, that the fact that you can even go to a hospital, be pregnant, give birth, and they give you that child, and they're like, here you go, and you take that home and have to look after it in itself is a crazy concept.
Yeah, but for that you have a lot of instinct.
True.
You have a lot of instinct. You also have a lot of oxy something. It's a great chemical in your body. It makes you happy.
Not Oxycontin, no.
No, not
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin.
Yeah.
Sounds like Oxycontin, which is not a good thing.
No.
And then you have that. You have instincts. You have books. And also, presumably, you know you're having this baby. It's not a surprise to you when they hand you a baby.
Yeah.
You don't know that a kid is showing up at your party who needs a pen in the neck or thigh or something. That's just...
Yeah. So you dealt with motherhood then for 12 and a bit years. Then you got into doing comedy.
Then one day I did a stand-up gig and it was just completely random. I'd never seen live stand-up. I just did it. And when I was on stage, I realized, oh, this is the thing.
How did you just do that though?
This has been written about so much. I feel your podcast listeners will get bored, but because they could Google much better versions of this now. But it was... So on the outside, what it was someone I knew vaguely had sent out an email about doing stand-up for charity. She was very not funny person, not even pleasant, let's be honest.
Okay.
So I was like, that charity is going bust.
Right.
Whichever charity you're doing stand-up for. But I was curious about it. So I found out it was by Funny Women UK were supporting it in some way. So I found out. I was just clicking through emails. These just giving emails.
Yeah.
Just take a break. You want to run a race. Why should I give you money? Just ask me for the money straight up, man.
Oh, you mean like if a friend sends you a link saying, I'm doing this?
I'm going to run the race. Do you want to support me? I don't give a shit if you're running. Just ask me for the money.
Well, I can see the benefit. Like, I would prefer, personally, as somebody who, wants to look charitable. Like, for me, it's great because my friends are like, do you want to donate to this thing? I'm like, yeah, I'll donate. I leave my name there.
I see.
I look good as a person.
No, I'd be fine with the money. But the whole palaver of like, I'm running. What? Just say to me, Sindhu, here's a charity I want to support. Mm-hmm. Just cut out the middleman, which is the run. Mm-hmm. Just ask me straight up for the money.
Right, I see what you're saying.
because then I have to read about the run, and then I have to feel like I never run. Anyway, so this charity thing, and then I read about Funny Women, and they did workshops, and I had 3 young children, and it was a weekend, and my husband was traveling, and there was a workshop that day in Leicester Square, and I was like, it was like 8, 9, 12 pounds or something.
Mm-hmm.
And people had said, oh, you're funny, and I was so bored
In life?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I just said, I'll go to the workshop. And I went to the workshop, and it was funny. There was like maybe 10 women, and it was interesting. It was novel. I think I wanted to do something. I'd been saying, oh, should I write? Or, it's something like that. And I had a business in the middle. I had an ethical fashion business.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was called Davy Doll.
Okay.
And it was like Net-a-Porter, but everything was ethical.
Okay.
So I had saved money in banking. Yeah. I lost all of it.
Really?
In the business, yeah. That taught me a few things. Turns out I didn't give a shit about merchandising. I gave many shits about ethical consumption.
Okay.
So I used to write a blog called Curate Your Consumption.
Wow.
And I cared about the blog, but not about how many red t-shirts we had. And and I didn't know how to run a business, so I bought all my stock. I still have stock upstairs.
No way.
It was just a massive, massive fail. But I guess what it did was it unleashed in me this idea that I think something creative, which had never really since grade school gotten any attention. Anyway, and then I went to the workshop, and the women who were doing the workshop, the Funny Women people, they said to me, we have a competition for the funniest woman in the UK. It's the Funny Women Awards. You should apply. You're very funny. And I was like, no, thank you. This has been fun.
Yeah, yeah.
But they were very persistent, and I fully shout out to Funny Women UK and Lynn, who runs it, and Karen Rosie, who was there at the time, Lynn Parker. They emailed and they suggested I do it, and then months went by. I went to India with the children. I came back, and then I think there was a voicemail, and there was going to be the heats were going to be like the next day, and I was like, what's the heats? And they're like, oh, it's just us. So I thought maybe I'll just go see them again. And I had felt, I suppose in retrospect, something had connected at the workshop. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was just that they were listening to me and people were laughing. Yeah. I don't know, and they said, bring a friend, and I thought, why would I bring a friend if I'm just seeing you?
Yeah.
But I did call a friend of mine who lives nearby and said, can you come out with me this evening? And I didn't really know what it was going to be. We went. It was Soho.
Okay.
And it was a pub, and she was like, she's American. She was like, dude, this is a gig. I'm like, what's a gig? She's like, it's stand up. I'm like, oh no. I thought I was just going to meet these 4 women. Turns out it was a gig.
For you? They wanted you to go up and say...
No, it was the heats.
Right. Okay.
And so I had several stiff drinks.
Yeah.
And I had quit smoking for 3 weeks. I immediately went and bought some cigarettes.
Amazing.
And then they just took us backstage, and Lynn Parker, I remember, said, make sure you do a 5-minute set, not longer. And I put up my hand and I said, set of what? I didn't know what it meant. And everyone laughed because they thought it was
a joke. Right.
But I had come far enough in my life and been thrown in enough unusual situations, including banking for that matter, where I knew when I was in a situation where I had to shut up and observe, I was very good at being an imposter. Mm-hmm. Very good. So I did that. There was a page with everyone's name, so I understood I would go on 4th. I started to watch what the other women were doing. They were like telling jokes and stuff, and I thought, okay, I'm going to tell 3 stories about my mom and I. And I got on stage. I'd never been on stage, never held a mic like that. Just kind of followed what the woman ahead of me had done. Mm-hmm. And people laughed a lot, but I was not in my conscious mind on stage. Mm-hmm. Something else clicked in. I remember thinking, I have to do this again. This is crazy.
Wow.
And I suppose at some very elementary level, you get attention, people are laughing. But I wasn't, on stage I was not nervous. Right. I knew there was a story, and I knew I had to tell them, and I had to get them to laugh, and I knew they would laugh. Because I thought those stories were funny.
Yeah.
So that was the heats, and I immediately went to the semifinal.
Amazing. Okay.
So that's where it started.
Yeah. And so do you feel like do you feel like some of the sense of it being rewarding is that you kind of, if you were that confident that you could kind of not control the audience, but that you had kind of some control over them, that you felt confident doing that straight away? Like if you like, because I used to do acting, and so hearing you say that, you know, the audience, you knew they were going to like the story and they knew they were going to find it funny. I used to find it very rewarding in acting, knowing you kind of control the audience in that way, like quite empowering in the creative, like art of what you're doing.
I didn't know those things consciously. So,
Right.
you know, I just went on, and I think it was in the moments that I was telling the story that I had all these senses picking up what was going on, but they were not on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I got any satisfaction. I went with my instinct.
Mm-hmm. And those 3 stories that you told of you and your mum, were they things that you had worked on previously in the no, was that just totally...
No.
Wow.
No. I mean, I had never worked on anything.
Yeah.
I just showed up to this thing.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So, yeah, but I guess I had always talked about my mom and told my friends at school, and because my mom's very funny.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I just pulled it out of my ass.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I mean that was the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I joined a course that was on weekends. It's Logan Murray's course, a very, very good course on how to do stand-up and how to hold a mic and so on. And then I learned, because it is like any craft, you have to learn it and you have to put in the hours, and I'm still doing that. And I don't think I'm anywhere close to being, you know, fully developed as a comic, whatever that means. But no, that was the start. I think that was the magnet. I never turned back.
Right.
Never.
So you
and
knew.
I had full confidence that it was something I wanted to do. I didn't know what level. I didn't know what gigs were. I didn't know any other comics.
Yeah.
I didn't tell anyone, by the way, at home.
Really?
I didn't tell anyone. It was my thing.
Do you think that you didn't tell people because you wanted it to be a private thing that other people might... that they couldn't come and see you on because you were worried that maybe...
Dude, I didn't tell my husband. Like, I didn't tell it wasn't other people. I just never talked about it. Right. Until a few things, you know, until I said I wanted to go do this, and I didn't talk about it. I told that one friend. Okay. Because she was there. Yeah. No, I think, and I wonder if other married or if other women in long-term partnerships with children will appreciate this. I was very deeply ensconced in my roles. Role as a wife, role as a daughter, role as a mother. My parents were getting older. This was just for me. Right. You know, and I thought, you know what, I guess in some ways it was a little bit like an affair. Mm-hmm. In that it was just for me. And it wasn't, I guess you want to keep an affair secret because, hello, unless your partner is very open-minded. Yeah. But it was more something I was doing that was slightly crazy. Yeah. Slightly weird. I also, as a young woman growing up, I did things and I nailed them. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the confidence to get involved with something and not nail it. Do you think that's partly because, like, obviously you went to, you know, incredible universities and, like, you're very academic, no? You went to Oxford, McGill, Chicago, Delhi. Is that correct? Did my homework. And do you think that being young and being, you know, academically excelling and then going into banking and all those things, that put the pressure on you to be like, I have to do this and I have to do it well? I think I went to all those places because I was nailing being academic. Right. I don't think I ever really stopped much to say, what do I want to do this? It was right. Like, this is the next thing that's coming up. I got to nail it. Yeah. And when I didn't nail things, I felt worthless. Interesting. Okay. So there was this, because I loved comedy. So, like, for example, I started Davy Doll and it went bust. Mm-hmm. That was difficult for me. Mm-hmm. But I was able to build a narrative around it, mm-hmm. where I joked about it, how it was like a, you know, hobby, and how lucky I was that I could, you know, spend all that money and I didn't become homeless. Mm-hmm. But I never really, it was only with my therapist that I talked about being a failure. Mm-hmm. So and I failed a lot in life, but I've never been okay. I mean, I don't know that other people are okay with being failures, but I really took it badly.
Yeah.
Also because I used to telescope my vision. No matter what else I was achieving, it was that one thing.
Right. That you would like define yourself
Completely.
on that failure.
Completely. But when it came to comedy, I stopped and I said to myself, Sindhu, do not fuck this up.
Yeah.
Don't be like that.
Yeah.
Because you want to do this forever.
Right.
I didn't want to contaminate comedy with my own demands of nailing it.
Okay.
I wanted to do it for the love of it.
Okay.
And that was very novel for me.
Yeah.
Never experienced that before. But I knew that it was, if I was ever going to be free, I had to do something that way. And this was that thing.
That's really interesting. So you didn't want to contaminate comedy with the pressure or of you having to nail it.
Yeah.
So comedy, do you feel like then you tried to approach it in this way that was, okay, I'm gonna like let go of that.
I'm gonna go to gigs and I'm gonna get better.
Okay.
Full stop. I didn't go looking for an agent. I just would show up at gigs.
Sure.
And I would just work on my jokes. And I loved gigging. I mean, honestly, I loved gigging so much. I was it was like a flame, and I was protecting it mainly from myself.
Yeah.
And I would just protect this flame because I was in love with comedy, and I just didn't want to bring all my shit and blow it out.
Yeah.
So I just did it. And I went I gigged anywhere and everywhere that I could get a gig.
Yeah.
And I took it seriously in that I didn't want to waste anyone's time.
Yeah.
People were coming out, they were coming to watch these gigs, not me, but whoever was on the bill. I took a lot of advice from other comics. I asked them what they thought. But I also had to come home to 3 quite young kids.
Yeah.
But it gave me an energy to be a mom that I had not had that kind of energy as much beforehand.
Okay.
But I think this really speaks to one of the central things I now believe is that as people, we bloom when we have meaning. Everyone's meaning is their own meaning, but you have to think this is a meaning. Motherhood is very meaningful, but is it your meaning?
Sure.
That's a very different question. So I have friends whose whole meaning is they want to have a nicer house and they work, that's fine. But I think comedy gave me a great meaning, and so I bloomed. And I think I became a much more energetic mother, much more, it took a long time, but so I just went into comedy with no expectations, with just for the love, and it wasn't hard. All I wanted to do was gig. So I got 5 minutes and then, worked on that, and because I hadn't watched stand-up, I had a lot to learn. I didn't know who Eddie Izzard was.
Yeah, wow.
I didn't know who Billy Connolly was.
Yeah.
And I mean, now I feel confident saying this, but I used to be in rooms where I'd be like, oh shit, I need to, not because but because it was a totally different realm to anything I didn't grow up in the UK.
Yeah.
And I grew up in India, and we had a closed economy. We didn't have this kind of television.
Yeah.
So I spent all my waking hours reading and watching and just immersing myself in comedy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't difficult. It wasn't difficult to protect the flame from myself.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about the flame, like that, it really sounds like, kind of a visual representation of you. Like I can literally see how much you love this craft, and you just trying to spend the time and learn so much in order to try and develop like the quality of that flame, rather than, like you said, like not trying to go out and get an agent and like all of that is just background noise. If this is something that it sounds like was so important to you from the beginning, do you think that for someone to be successful at anything, that's kind of the thing that you have to have at its core? Like if you have that genuine love for something, would you kind of like recommend or advise people who potentially want to get into the same thing? Like you can't focus on all that kind of background stuff, and you have to like put in the time, the quality of the time to try and like figure out if that is if not necessarily that's what you want to do, but like develop your craft in a way?
A couple of different things on this. One is my situation was very specific. I wasn't trying to earn a living from comedy.
Right.
So there were a number of marks I didn't have to hit.
Right.
And for that, I'm very, very grateful. I could do things in my own time. I have a lot of friends in comedy who had to earn from it. That was what they chose. You know, they were at that age. So I didn't have that. So it's not for me to say, well, you can be relaxed about the marks you need to hit.
Sure.
Having said that, I do think that marks or no marks that you have to hit, you have to want to gig for the sake of gigging up to a certain point at least. Otherwise, you know, the early days of gigging open mics on the circuit, it's brutal. And I don't think you'll make it. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because it's brutal.
Yeah.
I have done other things in the past where I've excelled, and I've not really, it's not that I didn't want to be there as much as I was not good at it, and I was very unsure of myself, and I kind of hadn't thought through why I was there.
Yeah.
And what I'll tell you about those things is this. I did them, and the most outward manifestation of me doing them was that I did them well. Inwardly, I paid a price, whether it was my physical health, whether it was my mental health in the sense, you know, whether I was too stressed. But again, in some of those situations, I had marks I had to hit. And so I just did it, you know. But I came to comedy much later than a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there were huge tracts of my life that were in place.
Yeah.
You know, which you can say was easier or was harder.
Right.
Depends. But yeah, so in terms of my advice to people who want to do comedy, I just get up and do it.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. Do it. We'll go from there.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, I have a few friends who are my age, you know, they're 24, 23, and they have these big things that they want to do in life, whether it's, you know, something creative or something with their career. And a lot of them will, I think, have that mindset of thinking, like, before I jump in and do it, I want to plan it perfectly. I want it to be, they have a vision for it, and they're like, I want to outline it like this. But it sounds like going out there and just doing it would be...
You could do both.
Yeah.
You know, you could say, this is what I want to do. And I mean, let's be honest, once I started doing it, I did go to a comedy course.
Yeah.
I did send out emails.
Yeah.
I did put alerts on my phone to gigs that wouldn't reply. So every 2 weeks I would email them.
Right.
You have to have both. But I guess the thing is, don't let... go out and do it and think about how you're doing it. You know, people in comedy often say, oh, you've got a great work ethic.
Okay.
I don't know if I have a great work ethic as much as I sort of get one foot in front of the other in the ways that I've been told and that I can see I need to do.
Okay.
So for example, when I was doing 5-minute gigs,
yeah,
no matter how well they were going, I never thought, well, where's my 10 minutes?
Right.
I thought they'll tell me when it's time.
Right.
And maybe because of that, I lost out a little bit. But that was my method because I didn't want the noise of getting into, am I good? Am I not good? I was like, Sindhu, what you want to do is gig.
Yeah.
Just go and gig. And there was some comedian or the other. Some people say it was this comedian, or some people say it was that comedian. Some people say it was Chris Rock. Some people say it was Steve Martin, who said basically, effectively, something like, be so good that they can't ignore you. I didn't know if I would be that good.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to gig.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were like, I'm going to trust the process, succumb to it.
Yeah, and I was trying to always simplify back to the flame.
Sure.
And the flame was gigging.
Sure.
You know, and I put myself in a lot of situations that really were out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, either you love it or you don't.
Yeah. I think, you know, comedy is such an admirable profession and a craft, and I listen to a bunch of comedy podcasts, and I love when people do stand-up. And when you first started, I know you said that you weren't nervous when you got on stage, but did you ever have moments, like you said, it was so brutal? Did you ever have moments going on stage, trying material or trying to make jokes, and it just bombing and like just not getting a laugh and being like...
Just to correct you, I was very nervous getting on stage the first time.
Okay.
But when I was in the stories, I don't remember thinking about being nervous or not. I remember just being in the moment of, this has to land.
Yeah.
Are these people going to get it? Like, I was in the process. I wasn't really, but getting on stage, I'd had so much to drink. It's not even funny. I'd also like started turbo smoking cigarettes after 3 weeks, you know.
It's good luck.
Oh God. So there's that. No, dude, I've died so much on stage.
Really?
Got heckled, been told you're shit, get off stage, this, that. But it's part of, if you talk to any comic, they'll say it's part of the process. And,
Yeah.
you know, in some ways, I guess you might say I'm conventional in that I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here.
Mm-hmm.
And so if other comics better than me have been heckled and told to fuck off stage, please come and tell me also.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll get up the next day and go back. And you look for all the hacks, you know. Sarah Millican, who's a wonderful comic, and I'm lucky to call her a friend. She, I think, had this thing where she gave herself to a certain time the next day to feel bad. And then she was like, now it's done.
Right.
So I remember taking that on board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, you know, you do it. There's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And I am one of those people that very much believes that if you are not going to slog some, you're not going to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I may be wrong, but that's my belief, is that you've got to work, you've got to do the bits that are painful.
Yeah.
So what I mean is not so much that that everything is a slog, but when the slog moment comes, if you shrink away, you've got to head on, get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You can't shy away from it.
You can't shy away from the shitty bits if you want the good bits.
100%. It kind of reminds me, I mean, obviously it's like a totally different thing, but for example, like at Mars or when they have like CEOs of massive companies and everything like that, if you're on a grad scheme for those things, they make you, you know, work on the factory floor.
Yeah.
You work in like all those like, you know, lower common denominator bits so that you understand how it works, and you know, you can say that you've been there and you've done it, and then you grow because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And so do you take most of your material from things that have happened in your, oh yes, thank you, classic, appreciate that, keeping an eye out for the,
I mean, for this mirror, which
Yeah.
drives me insane. I'm like, let's get it to do its job.
we're back. Do you take all your stories or all your comedy sketches and stuff from things that happen in real life?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge joke writer. I'm sort of someone who tells you something that's funny and then we tease out the bits, and then sometimes I get those bits in a beautiful formation like a joke, and I'm so impressed with that. I always think it's God smiling down on me. I really admire my comedy peers who can write like perfect jokes which you can take out and just put anywhere. I don't
Yeah.
have that. I have like this fucking big backstory and then all that stuff. So all my intuitions are from real life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting better at being able to construct a scenario that's sort of real but not, you know, that's a kind of mix of fiction and nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even all nonfiction, but I still find that difficult, and that sometimes is important for the premise of a joke. Having said that, everything I talk about is an exaggerated or slightly curated version of something that I've thought because of what's happening to me, or that's actually happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. And do you find as well, sorry, slipping on my coffee.
That's good. Slurping is good.
I know, but I've done a podcast before, I was just chewing on gum the whole time, and after that I posted it and I was like, why? Big no. Did you find that, did it ever cross your mind when you first started doing it, I'm a woman doing this, and comedy, I mean, maybe it's changing now, but it typically is a very male dominated field. Did it ever kind of cross your mind of, I'm a woman, I wonder if it's going to be harder, more difficult to be accepted, or did that not even really
It never crossed my mind going into it that,
Right.
oh, is it going to be harder? I mean, of course it's harder. You're a woman.
Yeah.
That to me is a given. I was in banking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it didn't stop me or bother me, you know, but as and when I felt that was in the room, I noted it. If I had something to say, I said it. I'm not a 20-year-old who's formulating her politics in comedy.
Right.
Right. So there was not a lot of things that I was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, really.
Does that mean that like you just knew how certain things were going to go?
No, it's just that I assumed there would be some gender bias.
Sure.
There is in the world, and there was in stand-up, and why wouldn't there be in, in a green room, I didn't know the nature of it.
Sure.
I didn't know the extent of it in some cases.
Right.
But it didn't deter me.
Yeah.
And I've seen and I've learned, and I've made my views on it clear when it's mattered. I'm not a high profile enough comic yet that I can, say something and it will be deeply impactful. But I have been aware that in any situation where I can make a difference, I will.
Right.
Whether it's someone who's opening for you or other jobs that might come up around you.
Yeah.
I have been aware of that.
So then have you experienced sexism in comedy or scenarios where maybe you potentially didn't get something because you're a woman, or...
I mean, it's one of those situations where the hypothetical is, if I'm in the room, I got the job.
Sure.
And if I'm not in the room, I don't know there's a job in the room.
Sure.
So having said that, I know that there's, panel shows have only one woman and so on. And I was aware of that. But I haven't, see, here's the other thing is my comedy career has been it sort of went like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was learning on the go, learning to be a comedian. And there were some rooms I didn't expect to be in, which I was in because the way my comedy was going. So it was very difficult to me to even have felt like, well, I should have been here. I'm like, why the fuck am I here?
Right, okay.
But I did notice that that there's only one woman on some shows.
Yeah.
And, but often I noticed there was more than one. So do I feel it's held me back? Not in ways that I know of.
Okay.
If it's held me back and I don't know, then ignorance is bliss.
Exactly.
But I suppose you can infer from the commentary around this, about the issue of women in comedy, that there has probably been some level of me not being in a room where I could have been because I was a woman.
Right.
But like I say, I don't know what those rooms are.
Yeah.
And I think more important to me than knowing what room I wasn't in is knowing that this is an issue.
Right.
So looking out and saying, do I have any agency here to change this particular situation so that there's more balance?
Knowing that sexism in comedy specifically...
So can I balance this out? Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, in some cases, it's like, if you can choose who's going to be on the bill for whatever reason, or you're on tour and you can choose, you think, I want women to open for me. Or you think there's this XYZ thing, not because I want to fill it with a woman, but because there's a lot of very funny women. And maybe they're not getting asked first, so, but I have so far, and hopefully this will change for the better, or no, this will keep increasing. I've had little bits of agency and I've tried to exert myself. That's what occupies me more than what room was I not in because I'm a woman.
I think that's sounds like a reflection of who you are as a person, because that's a very positive and constructive way to deal with an issue or phenomenon of sexism or whatever. But for you to say, okay, what can I do to be constructive in this scenario and make a difference, rather than who can I point fingers at?
What's that gonna do?
I agree.
And there's there's people for that.
Yeah.
And great, and I have no problem with that. It's just not what I think is meaningful. Yeah. Or I want to make a difference. Yeah. That's the bottom line for me. Yeah. And I have always had this typology of human beings, which I told my friends when I was in my early 20s, and they were all like, you're so stupid. There's boys and boy girls and girls and girl boys. Okay. And by the way, this is going to sound so stereotypy and so making gender a binary thing, and I apologize for that in advance. I was in my early 20s, that was many years ago, but also this is how I saw my world reflected back to me. I had several friends who were gay, and I guess they didn't go in any box. In fact, I think I asked one of my gay friends, which box should you be in? And she was like, shut up. I was like, okay. But I was also obsessed with being in a relationship. So this was really for the purposes of that.
Okay.
I never had a boyfriend. I was told I was very unattractive. So for me, it was a huge fear that I would never be asked.
Right.
To go out, to go to the dance, nothing. I was like, so I was constantly coming up with intellectual ways to have hope.
Okay.
In this quadrant, girls and girl boys, the girl boys are those women I knew who were great friends, but really, if a boyfriend came along, but they weren't worse friends, but that was kind of their vibe. And then girls were, they would meet the love of their life, but they were still better friends with you.
Yeah.
And they would drop him like for dinner or something and be like, I can't have dinner with you because I got to go to my girlfriend because she's upset.
Yeah.
And me and all my friends were very much in the girl quadrant. Easy for me to be in that quadrant, having 0 boyfriends.
Yeah.
But that's where, and that continues. So for me, I very much want to bring women up. I want to push them up. I want to pull them up. I want to scooch them up. You know, all the philanthropic work I've been involved in my years when I was at home is centered around girls' education, because I think that's, especially in underdeveloped countries, or we're not allowed to say underdeveloped, less developed, whatever the right term is. It's I care more. I mean, and I don't say I don't care about men, but I think I look where the greatest need is, and I think it is for young girls. You know? So in that way, when it comes to comedy, there's a lot of conversation, and I am not someone who is in a position of huge influence, but I try, and so I don't talk about it as much, but I try and exert myself where I think even a small change.
Yeah.
You know, because you never got a bucket of water without one drop.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to put a bucket of water under the tap? You don't suddenly get a full bucket.
It's very true.
It's not an Aladdin movie.
Yeah. It's a step-by-step process.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons, and we kind of were briefly speaking about this before we started recording, but one of the reasons why I really admire you as a comic, first of all, number one, because you are hilarious.
Thank you.
And I love your jokes, and you know, you're very entertaining, and I think you have such a confident and warm presence on stage that you're really a pleasure to watch.
I mean, you've been in rooms with your mother, Maureen, who's great, by the way. Check her out at Spin Off London. Amazing. Where there's been 6 other people in Hampstead, and I'm like, okay, fine.
I forgot about that.
Yes, and it's been brutal. There's not been that much laughter.
Yeah.
But those are the gigs. You have to do all the gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've seen me kind of struggling.
Yeah. But then I've also seen you, you know, like you did Live at the Apollo, like 3,500 seats. Like that's incredible. You know, the payoff that you can get and the success that you can get. I mean, obviously you have to be naturally talented and committed. I guess have a work ethic, like, you know, the people in the business have said to you.
You have to have a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
A little bit of luck, but I think that your luck, I think we create a little bit of space out of belief for our luck. I think luck is a thing that it'll take longer, your luck, to come to you if your energy is, I'm no good.
Yeah.
But if your energy is neutral, I never went to comedy thinking I'm really good.
Sure.
But if your energy is, I'm not thinking about how good I am, I'm thinking about how well I'm trying to do this thing.
Yeah.
Then you're almost distracted. And so you're not doing the negative self-talk. Then I think luck is like, oh, there's some space for me.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like if you can try to place the emphasis on the thing that you're doing, whether it's comedy or whatever, and try and like see yourself, I guess, as a way, it's just like a vessel of building that craft or whatever, rather than it making it about you and yourself.
And rather than being like, this is something I have to be good at every time or right away. I often say to my kids, you really were shit at walking for the longest time. One of you just didn't get up. We thought there was something wrong with you. The other one just scooched on their backside. You were shit at walking. Now look at you.
Yeah, pro walkers.
You're pro walkers. Really, look, you're walking. You're walking away from me as I'm telling you this.
Yeah.
You're good at walking. We don't become good at something just like that. And I think it's so hard though in the moment to piece all this together. So I think you keep listening, you keep reading, you keep reminding yourself by listening to other people that this is a way.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you do it your way.
Yeah.
And then sooner or later, you know, I think you'll come to a place where you become good at checking yourself and saying, oh, just be about the gig.
Yes.
Just be about the gig.
I think that's really phenomenal advice, especially for young women, because, you know, I look up to a lot of comedians, and not because I want to be a comedian, but like their podcasts or whatever it is, or people who are successful now and they're, you know, in their late 40s or whatever, and they all say, when you listen to their story, like, I started when I was 23 or 25, you know, and then, or you take into account, or like I started 5 years ago or however long it was, and it really makes you realize, like, this is not something that one day you just start doing and boom, you're going to have all the skills and you're going to be successful. Like you said, it can be a slog and like it can be tough, but if it's something you love, then
it will be a slog.
Yeah.
But what is worthwhile that's not a slog?
It's a good point.
Go into labor.
Yeah.
You were telling me earlier, I hope to be married and have kids.
Yeah.
Dude, when you're in labor, it's a fucking slog.
Yeah.
What are you doing that's worthwhile that's not a slog?
Yeah.
You know, it's just that we think that there's some slogs that should be there and some that shouldn't. Mm-hmm. We don't get to decide.
Yeah.
You just focus on the thing that you love and don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
And you'll be fine.
Yeah. I think it's Google's, was it Google's or Facebook's, like, or Apple's, I can't remember who it was, but their slogan when they first started was, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a t-shirt I wear around the house which says, work hard and be nice, but also to yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, and we hear a lot about that, you know, be kind to yourself, be kind to yourself. And I was always a very ambitious, very hard-nosed young woman. So be nice to yourself. I was like, be nice is for wimps.
Yeah.
And I'm still tough. But I think the be nice, if I had known in my 20s that not being nice to myself was actually holding me back from success, I would have fucking become nice to myself because I wanted to succeed.
Sure.
But I didn't know that.
Right.
I thought success was built on tough.
Yeah.
You know? And now I think, you idiot. So for those, and for anyone who's listening to this who's like, I think be nice is so wimpy. Yeah, but if you can find the ways to be nice, then it'll help you get where you're going.
By be nice, what do you mean? Like, do you mean, like, you know, emotionally talking to yourself about, like, you know, not being so hard on yourself, or what does that mean?
It means, well, by be nice to yourself, during the day, when you hear yourself say something negative to yourself about how, why did I have that to drink? If I was really disciplined, I wouldn't have drunk so much, and then I could get work done. And then just after that, you'll have a little voice say, you know, you're never going to be like that. You're never going to. Stop and say, if I had a little daughter, would I say this to her? And I guarantee you 9.5 times out of 10, you'll say, no, God, I would never say that to my little daughter or my little sister. Then you have to stop. Doing that, you're not being nice to yourself.
Yeah.
So you must have compassion for yourself. And compassion is not pity. Mm-hmm. Compassion comes from great self-belief. Mm-hmm. So when I say be nice, I mean have the compassion for yourself that stops you from this endless tape of negative self-talk. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult because all around us are people that are tough on themselves, and they're tough in the gym, and they're tough in this. Sure. Mm-hmm. But ask yourself, would I speak like this to a little girl who was my own child? You probably wouldn't, in which case you shouldn't be doing it to yourself. Negative self-talk that reaches deep into our roots is very different than setting an alarm at 6 and waking the fuck up even though you don't want to. Right. That's discipline. Right. This is negative self-talk, and there's a place that they meet, and we get confused. Yeah. Especially young women. Yeah. I don't want to say, look, when I say especially young women, bear in mind, I've only ever been a young woman, so that's why I'm using that example. I can't, I'm not saying it doesn't happen to young men. Yeah. But that confluence of negative self-talk and discipline is where we get confused.
That's really interesting.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense, because it, like, if I understand you correctly, in a way it's like, okay, I'm going to wake up tomorrow at 7 a.m. because I want to get X, Y, and Z done, and you're waking up and getting it done because you want to set, you want to have rules for yourself and you want to be productive, etc. You're not doing it because you went out on Saturday night and you had a crazy night and you're feeling a bit fat because you ate whatever, and so you're not like, I'm going to do this because it's difficult for me and I need to be tough on myself so that I can feel better about myself.
Yes, and because if I don't do that, then I'll probably end up being a slob.
Yeah.
That's just behind those first 10 sentences. Behind that is this fear that, but in me is a slob.
Yeah.
And just, there's I want to be clear that I don't think everyone needs to go and look for negative self-talk. Maybe you're not doing negative self-talk, in which case, great.
Yeah.
But I'm saying a lot of being compassionate with yourself is about, I think, also I think it's about recognizing that you don't know everything. You can't be fully on 100 on every field, but that you will be fine. You'll get where you want to go. It's just that taking down the kind of this, which I think can happen. I mean, maybe I'm sounding crazy and no one has this.
Yeah.
Maybe I sound insane. Everyone's like, she's a psychopath, because no one really feels like this. But I think oftentimes a lot of ambition and drive.
Yeah.
We can be very hard on ourselves and we can have no compassion.
Yeah.
And in the long run, that will hold you up.
Yes.
I'm all about success and winning and ambition.
Yes.
It's taken me a long time to recognize that some of the toughness I probably could have done without.
Yeah.
But I'm also someone who looks at my life and says, it turned out pretty well.
Yeah.
I did all those things, so I don't dwell on it.
But it makes sense. Like, have you heard of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Yeah, I think I read a synopsis of that many years ago, and I was like, I'm very ineffective. I don't fucking do any of these things. I'm a loser.
So I felt the same way. Like, when I was reading that book, especially the chapter on it talks about listening and how you should just listen to other people. And everyone was always like, yeah, but isn't that pretty self-explanatory? But then when I read it and truly understood what kind of like listening meant, I was like, wow, I really have fucking not been listening for like my whole life. But there's a bit in it which talks, and it just reminds me of what you were talking about how if you put in the time now to be compassionate and self-love, like you can potentially have more success later on. And they talk about in this one chapter about how, let's say you have a goose and you want the goose to be, it sounds totally crazy now, but like, and you want the goose to be laying golden eggs, right?
Ooh, yes, please.
I know, right? But the only way that goose is going to be able to lay like quality golden eggs is if you look after the goose. Don't just keep on expecting like these golden eggs to be coming out, if that goose 24/7, if that goose isn't being like, treated well.
Like, hey, nice goose.
Yeah.
How are you today?
Yeah, do you want a massage?
Fucking egg.
Exactly.
That doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
That doesn't work. The other thing I want to say about compassion is when we think of being compassionate to ourselves, we think one of the things, and I've said it, is negative self-talk. The other way that you can be compassionate to yourself is to watch what energy you're allowing around you. And sometimes you have to say no to people you love. And that's very hard. And women are fundamentally caretakers, and it's very hard for us. But we have to do that. And it's not disrespectful. It's not, even if it hurts them, you've got to do it because you got to choose. It's them or me. And I got to choose me. Now, this doesn't sound compassionate towards the other person, but I'm not saying give them the finger. But it's called a boundary. And laying boundaries around people that are important to us, whether it's our family or, our partner or whatever, that can be so destabilizing. If you've been raised to be the caretaker, raised to always say yes, raised to, I'll find a way around it. But it's important to learn that and to experiment with it and to really find your groove, because to be compassionate with ourselves, we have to be available to ourselves. And we can't be available if bits of us are in these stress bubbles of doing things that don't, not being able to say no.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important.
Do you think, my mum always says that she learned how to say no in her 30s. Do you think that...
It took me much longer.
But
your mom's ahead of me in so many ways. I know that, It took me much longer.
Yeah.
And because I think I come from a particularly complicated family.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken me much longer. I think I learned to say no to my mother early. And that was fine because she was like, oh, good. Finally you said no to me. Finally you have a boundary. Thank God. She was a very, very unusual mother in that sense. Because she could see that I would not make it. She used to say, you won't make it. You don't know how to do boundaries. First you put a boundary on me. And then she would say to me, I never let you have boundaries. You would just, and it's my fault.
Right.
Because if you don't learn at home, you don't know it outside.
Right.
So that was I was very lucky to have that sort of intensive boundary laying permission from my mother and then practice on her.
How did that even work? So in the sense that, like, if she didn't let you have boundaries, was that because she would kind of or ask things of you that you couldn't say no to?
Yeah, I had to marry someone they wanted.
Right, of course, yeah.
It's not that I did, I was able to say yes or no.
Yeah.
But, there was that. There was, issues around, I was like the good kid. I had to perform at this and perform at that. And no one asked me ever what I thought.
Right.
It was just go do this. And, and you couldn't answer back and you couldn't have an opinion and, and she was tough.
Yeah.
But I remember when I got the scholarship to come to Oxford, and it was so exciting. There was 5 of us, 4 Rhodes Scholars and 5 Radha Krishnan Scholars. And it was a very exciting time. And I'd arrived in October. And so we were on a scholarship and we got, I think it was £4,700 a year.
Okay.
To live on.
Okay. From the university?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that was it.
Yeah.
They gave you food and lodging, and that was your money. Whether you bought toothbrushes with it or did coke, it was like your business. Yeah. But our parents didn't have the money, so I literally, I had a plane ticket.
Yeah.
And then my dad gave me £20.
Yeah. Wow.
Said, and you'll have money when you go there.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, you're supposed to live on 40. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
So if you think about it, you have £4,700 to spread over 12 months.
Wow, that's crazy. Right?
But from India, we had clothes. We didn't shop or anything. And I arrived in October, and my mother called me and said she had to have surgery. She needed a tummy tuck, not for cosmetic reasons. And she said to me, this was probably beginning of November. And she said, I'm very scared. I need you here. My elder sister was there, and she wasn't getting along with her or something, and she said, I don't trust your father. I don't even like your father. I was like, yes, of course, they had a complicated marriage.
Yeah.
And so she said, you have to come. And I remember thinking, they don't have the money to buy me a plane ticket. Mm-hmm. So then she said to me, because if you don't come and I die, and I was like, I'll come.
Wow.
I went to my tutor and said, because they gave you money in installments. It was December.
Right.
The cheapest ticket I could find was £500, I think.
Wow.
So I asked someone, I said, what will I do? They said, take an overdraft. So I did.
Yeah.
No one in my family asked me, how are you buying this ticket?
Right.
And I couldn't tell my dad that I was coming because obviously there was so much tension at home. I bought the ticket with an overdraft. I flew to India. I sat by her bedside while my sister was there, but not being particularly helpful or getting along with my mom. She was being helpful, but they weren't getting along. Held her hand. She was like, how's Oxford? I said, it's fine. I never brought up the money. And I flew back. It took me my entire time at Oxford to pay back the overdraft.
Wow.
So what I did was, I never went to the pub, also because I wasn't a big drinker, but I started to work like in the library and little things because I had to pay this money back.
Yeah.
That was I didn't have a boundary where I could have said, Ma, I can't do it.
I see.
This is your marriage.
I see.
This is no chance.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing she was trying to reverse.
Right. And did you ever hold any resentment towards your family for like not asking you how are you paying for it or how?
I think I did until my mother was like, oh, that time I asked you to come, that was fucked up. Wow. And I was wrong and I'm so sorry. And can I give you the money now?
Wow.
And I cried and I told her how hard it was. And she said, what a terrible mother I was. And I'm so sorry. And that's what we have to make sure you don't keep doing. All the resentment went like this.
It's incredible.
Because all you want from your parent is for them to say it wasn't your fault.
Yeah.
It was mine.
Yeah.
That's why this hurts so much.
Yeah.
Not because you're a bad daughter, but because I asked things of you that were not right.
It's amazing how, even hearing you having such a close conversation with your mum like that, there are things that even though you're so close to your parents, like whether that's emotionally you're close with them or like, physically you have their DNA, but some conversations and it can only be a few words, but are so hard to say and can really bring you on the edge of tears, like even admitting those things or like having like small conversations like that, but then they can just change everything. And because your family, you don't hold like this grudge, because fundamentally it's love that
100%, and they're transformative, those conversations. And my mother used to say that I have to ventilate this family because so many stinking secrets. By secrets she meant the things I hadn't said to her when I was upset, or they weren't like big secrets as such, but she used to say we need to ventilate, we need to open all the windows and she was right. She's very right.
Yeah. It's amazing that you were able to have that with your mom.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't think I would be the person I am or have the achievements I have or be the mother I am or the partner or the friend. I would in no way be how I am in the positive ways without my mother.
Yeah. Being
how she was and the huge change she made in her life she just kind of pivoted to be like, oh shit.
Yeah.
We need to help you get away from some of the shit I did to you. Oops.
Yeah.
And she did it with a lot of joie de vivre, I mean, while she apologized, she didn't have guilt.
Right.
She was like, I didn't know better.
Yeah.
But do you want to dwell on that or you want to get better? And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And she never, ever, ever criticized me for having a go at her.
Oh, really?
I used to scream. I had so much rage.
Yeah.
And she used to say to me, like the next day she would call and she would say, how are you? And I'd say, I'm okay. And she'd say, I'm really happy you screamed at me, because who are you going to scream at if not your own mom? The neighbor's mother.
Yeah.
You have to scream at your own mother. And when you scream at me, I think this is not disrespect. She's vomiting out her anger, and better out than in.
This is such an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. It's very spectacular. I, of course, took it for granted for a long time. But, I now recognize that's... You don't learn compassion with yourself unless someone is showing you how to be compassionate by being compassionate with you.
Yeah.
And also with themselves. My mother's unwillingness to dwell on guilt was a kind of self-compassion that was so empowering, both to her and to me. Can you imagine having a mother who'd been like that, and then she was like, oh, poor me, I was really mean to you, do you hate me? Would have been like, what?
Yeah, it'd be pointless.
It would be worse.
Yeah.
But it's very empowering, her ability to have compassion for herself.
Yeah. So
empowering. And that's why I say, she could have gone down the way of a lot of negative self-talk.
Yeah. It's so interesting though, because talking about guilt and she didn't dwell on guilt, I honestly think that is a good thing, because guilt just comes from the past, right?
And it's also waste. What can you do?
Exactly. There's nothing you can do. And even anxiety, even though I know a lot of people suffer with anxiety is just worrying about the future,
I mean, anxiety can also be just worrying about now.
Yeah, true.
Like you can't cope, but I think anxiety is always a sign that there's business you're not attending to.
Yeah.
I've had terrible, terrible anxiety and panic, like paralyzing panic attacks and agoraphobia.
Wow.
After I had my, after I quit working in banking. It's kind of why they asked me to quit, because I went kind of crazy.
Wow.
And what I recognize now, I'm not on antidepressants. I was at the time. What I recognize now is that the human body and the human spirit is very, very keen on being in balance. And if you're not going to do it, it's going to at least try. And the way that anxiety works, it's a flare from a boat saying, and I think I couldn't be more grateful than for the anxiety I had. Now, you have the anxiety and then you go and get help. But I think what you have to remember about anxiety is anxiety, just like guilt, is something to do with the past. Your anxiety is, it's like a dinner party that for the family where the one relative who's drinking and being out of control and slightly dangerous and you think they might set you on fire, they're acting out because there's dysfunction in that room. That relative is called cousin anxiety. You know? And if you can help unpack cousin anxiety, you will be much safer in that room and in your own system. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
My mom used to say to me when I first, because I was like flying around to New York and I was a banker and I had a baby and I was taking my nanny with me to New York, and then I had this complete like collapse and couldn't leave the house and completely went mental. Bananas, proper bananas. My mother used to call me and say, so how are you today? And I'd be like, I can't leave the house. And she was, don't cry, tell me properly. And I would say, oh, I can't leave the house and I can't do this and I have anxiety. And she would say, oh, anything else? And I would say, no. She said, okay. This many people have, but they are not being honest, so they are suppressing with medicines. You have it in the open, be crazy. It's no problem. Be crazy, it will pass. And it was such a vote of like confidence that I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
She didn't pathologize it. And then I said, well, they want me to take medicine. She said, yeah, take the medicine. She said, and I said, she said, you're going to be fine. This is a phase.
Yeah.
She said, tumne bahut kuch daba ke rakha hai. You've kept a lot pressed down. And she said, and she used to say, when the fountain of shit will hit all of us, then we will be stinking, but we will be free.
Yeah.
And she was right.
Yeah.
She was right. You know, and I think I was lucky when I had only one child and he was young enough that I was a very, you know, very hands-on mom that I got rid of some of that stuff. It could have come later, my fountain of shit.
And do you think that, because almost like your mom kind of accepting it and being like, it's okay, be crazy, do you think that it just reminds me of times when I've gone through like periods where I'm very sad or something, and typically people have been like, try not be sad, it's okay, don't cry, and then you know, my mom and my best friends have just been have given me amazing advice of just being like, be sad, just be really sad and like dwell in that.
Yeah, I think one of the great advice that my parents gave me, which is not Western, was when I was in the worst of it, they didn't pathologize it at all.
Okay.
So they were like, distract yourself, buy a dress.
Right.
But not, don't be sad.
Okay.
Be sad, go buy the dress.
Okay.
Because I think what they understood is in the process of being sad but doing other things, the other things take over.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as a Hindu, I've been raised to believe, and I do believe, that we have the mind, intellect, we have our spirit, and we have our feelings. Mind and feelings are quite connected, but not completely. So when your mind runs riot and wild is when you have, that's how you feel. Then you feel anxious or sad, but your spirit is untouched. So you need to keep distracting. It's the job of the mind to think. So my father's technique was to be like, oh, you're sad. Okay, cool. Watch a TV show, eat some ice cream. Not like small things. Not like get over it.
Right.
But just don't for a moment stop and say, this is who I am.
Right. Don't let it define you.
No, and they didn't pathologize it at all.
Yeah.
And that was very helpful. I mean, my mother was a therapist, so she knew that at some point, if you were totally cuckooks, you needed to go to a facility. Sure. And she used to say to me, you are not asylum crazy. And I'd be like, oh, don't say asylum. What if I have to go to the asylum? What about my son? She used to say to me, Are yaar. She used to say to me, if people like you were going to the asylum, asylum will be full and then they will have nowhere to put the really crazy people. So by constantly showing me that it was a phase and it would pass and that it had happened to other people, but not ever giving me reasons or saying you made bad choices. Yeah. Just being like, oh shit, look at this. Yeah. It was so helpful.
Yeah.
You know, and my father came and stayed with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They would in India, if someone is very, very unhappy or grief or there's a death or sickness, family will come.
Right.
Because company is a lot.
100%. And I think one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you and have you on the podcast, and why I think that, you know, most of the people who listen to this are women aged I mean, it's women and men, but most of it is women aged between like 23 to 27. And I think that...
Those were the best years of my life, by the way.
Really?
Fuck. 20, I was my slag phase. I loved it. I should have extended it a bit more, but I didn't. So I started at 22 and ended at 29.
Yeah.
I should have given it some more time, but I
it's
fell in love.
It's a decent chunk though, 22,
Yeah, but it wasn't that prolific.
Okay.
It was the phase, and then in the phase I kept thinking, oh, I'm very serious about him, and I'm very serious about
him.
By the time I came to, he's just a great fuck.
Yeah.
God, it was almost too late, because then I fell in love, and now look at me.
Do you regret doing that? Because I know so many girls my age, when we date and stuff like that, like you put so much emphasis on one person and you're like, I want to try and make it with this one person. Do you wish that you had just kind of like...
Yeah, I wish I'd just kind of been like, what are you doing for me?
Right.
Like, in the bed.
Yeah.
Honestly, that should have been the question. But I mean, I sound terrible, and I hope my teenagers never listen to this. But I am fascinated by the question of women, successful women, whatever that means, ambitious young women, and sexual agency.
Yeah.
To me, it's fascinating. And I think not all women experience their sexual selves as necessary to their self-actualization.
Right.
But some women do.
Okay.
And that puts them in a tricky place.
Right.
Because they're ambitious and they're this and they're that, but their sexual and erotic selves are a huge part of their self-actualization. How do you do that when you also want to have relationships? And what does it mean? Because for monogamy, and what does it mean for when you want to be monogamous? All those questions. I find that very fascinating.
Do you mean, like, just so make sure I understand, do you mean like if, like, typically, like, very ambitious or successful women tend to take more, maybe control or like navigate their erotic or sexual experience, and typically might get more pleasure, I don't mean like physical pleasure, but like just general pleasure out of experimenting with more people or learning new things?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's just rewind that. I want to say that women who want to exert a lot of control, because we said ambitious or successful women. I don't know a lot of women. They're like, oh yeah, that's me. Most women will be like, who's she talking about? Let's just say women. Women who are on a journey and they have the choices to say, what do I want? What do I not want? Some women, I feel, there's a place in their life for exploring an erotic and sexual self that's very important to who they are. But there's not that many avenues within the framework of growing up and marriage and kids to know where to put that. And you don't want to rock the whole boat by being like, I actually feel like, what's her name? Anais Nin? Anais Nin, well, sorry, now your listeners can know how silly I am. She was a very interesting woman, but yeah. There was a movie, okay, listen, there's a movie with, what's her name, man? Okay, who was the woman who acted in Zero Dark 30?
Oh, the ginger. She's
Jessica
really beautiful.
Chastain.
Jessica Chastain, yeah.
She was in a movie about gambling.
You talking about Molly's Game?
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't that the movie?
That's not Jessica Chastain. Maybe is it? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But she was in another movie where she was, maybe it was Molly's Game, or another movie where she was like an operative of some kind, but she came back and had sex with a guy, and it was she paid him.
Okay.
And in that movie, you see she's successful. So, by the way, listeners, I could have the wrong person in the wrong movie at the wrong time, but I think the point is that it was Jessica Chastain, and it is that she has all these success, but she doesn't have a relationship.
Yeah.
And she has sort of anonymous sex with male escorts, and she's very cut and dried about it, but it's incredibly important to her sense of her work and who she is.
Right.
That's fine in a movie.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, when women explore their sexual selves, if they come up with that, but they also want to have all the other stuff,
right?
The partner and the children and the thing, what happens? And I'm sure this happens for men as well. But the reason I think it's interesting in the case of women is because women's sexual wanting has always been problematic.
Yeah.
It's always been problematic. And there's a new song out by Cardi B called WAP.
Okay.
WAP stands for wet ass pussy.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm.
Learning something new every day.
It's like huge right now on the charts. And I watched the video, and it's with Megan Stallion. And I have mixed views on how feminist, certain things that Cardi B does or doesn't do, or other big icons in, are they feminist? Are they not feminist? But this song and its gaze on the power a woman's vagina wields was very feminist in my opinion.
Oh, really?
And it's because it talks about power and sex.
Yeah.
And being female.
Yeah.
In a way that kind of disregards men.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just my reading. I think my kids, if they ever knew that I was even commenting on that, they would go crazy with embarrassment. But again, I just think it's an interesting way of talking about something which has really never been in the realm of women. And I think for me, I'm much older than you, it was not available at all at that time.
Yeah.
I think it's much more available, and I'm very happy for both my son and my daughters.
Yeah.
That they have that available to them.
Yeah.
That sort of that line of self-inquiry.
Yeah.
I think is very important. But sorry, I totally digressed from what you were saying.
No, but it is so interesting.
Oh, I was saying 23 to 27 was the best years.
Yes, the best years. But going back to like what you were talking about just now about how, sex and women and, powerful women, well, this is very difficult to navigate. And, it was definitely very difficult to navigate if we go further back in time. And like, I guess you could say today is the best day because it's the most recent day that women and being progressive and sex and everything. But even now, like speaking to like guys like, who I've slept with, if I've asked them like, how many people have you slept with? And they tell me, and then they ask me and I tell them, like X amount or whatever. And recently I was talking to this one guy and he goes, he's a lovely person, but he goes, and I think it was just a natural thing that he said, but he was like, yeah, I feel like that's a fair enough amount, or like a good amount for somebody who I would want to sleep with or something. And I was just like, I didn't say anything because I was just kind of thinking about it. And I was like, I would it's just such a comment that you only say to a girl because girls typically have to have like only a certain number.
Yeah. I think so. I think that's absolutely right. I think the rules around knowing your sexual self and the procedures and the journey, the rules around that are different for men and women.
Yeah, for sure.
I think they're exactly, so basically I agree with everything you said. It's changing, and I think that comment from that young man is strange. But I think there's sex because sex feels great, and then there's your knowledge of your erotic self, and those are different things. They often meet in the middle, or they often meet, but they don't have to meet. But I think for women, I believe, and when my daughters are older, I'll probably talk to them about this. I think just like you have to look at your finances, just like you have to look after my mother used to say to me, get a pedicure, it's looking like a donkey's hoof. So you gotta take care of your body. Yeah. Gotta take care of your health. I think it's important for women to maybe have a little think about where they stand on the issues of who their erotic self is.
Yeah.
Because I think it'll give you more information when you come to saying no or saying yes or saying I want to be with you or I don't want to be with you, or this is what I want. And I think the more information we have when we exert our agency, the more positive that is.
Yeah.
So am I even making sense?
No, you are. And I think
because I'm trying to unpick a very complicated idea in my head and I don't even know if it's coming out like a lunatic.
You are, and whether people understand it or they don't understand it or whatever, like I think that what you just said about how, young women or women in general need to think about it, I think it's a really encouraging thing to say because there's so much stigma, regardless of whether you're talking about sex or not, but like there's so much stigma and so much taboo about eroticism and talking about that. And like now actually there's a lot more like female porn coming out in the sense that it's like descriptive and it's stuff that's tailored to more towards women and just kind of like Pornhub basically. But all these things are, regardless of whether it's porn or not, it's it's a thing, you know, in life. And I think it is an important thing to think about. And, you know, everything is good to just kind of like discuss and like try and form, not necessarily even coming to an opinion on it, but just planting the seed and being aware of that.
Just saying, like, for example, when you're growing up, when you're 17, 18, you think one day I'll have a bank account. So look, this is HSBC, this is NatWest, this is a checkbook. You're not going and opening the account and having. Similarly, one day your erotic self will ask you if you know who she is.
Yeah.
And on that day, you want to be able to say, well, I kind of thought about it. You know, I was like, oh, I heard this weird lady on this podcast. You know, whatever. Just because I very much want, and I very much believe that to be a woman is complicated and difficult, and the world is not very fair and so on, but it's also incredibly joyful. We can produce kids. Now, there are people who say things and say, well, you know, what is the definition of a woman and so on, and I'm not taking away from anybody on this. I'm just saying, I guess I'm just talking about cis women. There's so many things I wish I'd known.
Yeah.
And then I think I would have experienced myself in this female body in an even more exciting way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm putting out there.
Right.
And I by no means think that the erotic issues are limited to cis women. Not at all. But I speak from that experience. And I also think that you can unlock your creative potential the more you know about yourself. And a very big part of a woman is to, I mean, it's equivalently important, is who are you as a sexual being? Away from the gaze of men. Forget what they're looking at.
Yeah.
What are you looking at?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's more and more available. And I would encourage women to look at that and just think this is also a pillar, like financial independence and other kinds of independence. This is a kind of independence.
Yeah.
So that I choose what I bring. I know what I'm bringing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, 100%. And even just, I was talking about this with my friend the other day, like she was talking about how she thinks it's great because now women are more, you know, sexually, they have more power over their own sexuality and stuff, and so they can sleep with loads of guys. And I was like, but it's not about that. Like, it's not about.
Yeah, I mean,
it might be for some people.
Sure, and that's great. I mean, the more women are allowed to sleep with whoever they want. Yeah, it's not about that only. You know, but I'm talking about something slightly different.
Yeah.
But hey, if you're having a lot of sex, great.
Yeah.
Big buyer of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Safe sex.
Yeah.
Safe sex and
Yeah. So interesting.
So fun.
Yeah.
I feel like I rambled about all kinds of things. You had all these questions about comedy that I'm not sure I
No,
answered.
I honestly, it's one, like, I love doing these podcasts because it's great. I feel like to have an outline of things we want to talk about, and we did, you know, talk about a lot of those things, but it's more just interesting being in the moment and hearing what you have to say. And
yeah, and one thing I did want to say though about comedy, because I think some people, like you say, might listen to this and say, well, you know, if I want to do comedy, what should I do? So I just want to quickly put that in there.
Yeah.
One is I feel for a lot of people who need to be gigging on the circuit right now, there's no circuit.
Right.
And that's hard, but hopefully they've got into some Zoom gigs and stuff. The question of do I need an agent or what do I need? That's a big question. And I think ultimately at some point you need an agent because there's gatekeeping in the industry and only agents are able to talk to the gatekeepers. But that doesn't mean that you can't get quite a distance on your own. If you want to go the traditional route of like doing stand-up and not being online and going to gigs, and then, you know, there's a bunch of competitions you can be in where that kind of gets your head over the parapet. But equally, in this day and age, I think, you know, you've got to think, well, maybe I just do a bit of stand-up and put it out on Instagram. The point is, at some point, you will know that you're good enough to approach a few agents. Your peers will tell you, or they'll just approach you because you won in a competition or because you have so many online followers and everyone's talking about you. You know what I mean? I think that's the way. I can see why you would need an agent to bypass industry people, but there's never been a better time to keep doing your thing and putting it online, because then the industry will take notice of you.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say. So do you have to have an agent to get better at comedy? No.
Okay.
No. But, eventually, I suppose, by the time you'll get an agent when the time comes, and I can see you should send the emails and so on. But it's unlikely that you'll be an incredibly, massively successful comic online and an agent won't contact you.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good.
I'm going to wrap this up there.
I don't even know what the time is.